Welcome, once again, to our gentle corner of history, told not with fireworks or loud drums, but with the quiet rustle of pages and the soft hum of memory. Tonight we'll drift into a story about the Victorian era, about invention, about something so ordinary that you might not think of it at all when you're winding down for sleep, the flush toilet. So, before we begin, make sure you're comfortable. Dim your lights, settle under your blanket, maybe let your pillow catch the weight of your head. Notice your breath, the way it flows gently in and then softly out. Tonight's story is not one you need to memorize or analyze. It's one to wander with, to float alongside like a leaf on a slow, lazy stream. And as we drift together into this gentle story, I wonder, where in the world are you listening from tonight? And what time is it there? In your own quiet corner. And if this calm journey helps you unwind, feel free to tap like and subscribe, only if it feels right. But don't think too much about that now. For now, let your shoulders drop, your eyes grow heavy, and let me tell you a tale. London, the mid-19th century. The city is alive with the clatter of horse-drawn carriages, the muffled calls of street vendors, the occasional creak of a lamplighter's ladder. It is not the London of glossy postcards, but a breathing, muddled place. Fog clinging to chimney tops, coal smoke hanging in the air like an old coat, streets busy with urgency yet still tinged with the quaint rhythms of gaslight life. And within this bustling canvas lived Thomas Crapper, a name forever linked, whether fairly or unfairly, to the flush toilet. His surname, innocent in his day, would later cause giggles across generations, as though fate itself had a mischievous sense of humour. But for Thomas, the work was serious. He was a plumber, a craftsman, a man intent on making the messy corners of life a little more bearable. Close your eyes and picture his workshop. Wooden shelves laden with polished brass fittings, pipes stacked like organ tubes, ready to be cut and shaped. The faint scent of machine oil and hot metal clings to the air. A kettle hisses gently on a small stove, the promise of tea never far away. You can hear the scratch of a pencil as Thomas makes notes on a scrap of paper, the kind of notes that only make sense to their author. Arrows, sketches, little reminders to tighten a joint or reshape a valve. The flush toilet itself was not entirely his invention. Long before, in 1596, Sir John Harrington, godson to Queen Elizabeth I, had devised a device that flushed with water. But it was, like many early gadgets, a curiosity rather than a convenience. It took centuries before the world was truly ready for such a contraption. By the Victorian age, however, the problem of sanitation could no longer be ignored. Crowded cities needed solutions. Disease stalked the streets as surely as the night fog. And into this world stepped Crapper and his fellow engineers, men of practical vision who turned prototypes into household fixtures. Thomas refined the ballcock, perfected siphon systems, and built reliable cisterns. Not exactly the kind of inventions one brags about at a dinner party, perhaps, but in truth, his work quietly changed lives. The difference between a foul-smelling privy and a functioning flush system was the difference between discomfort and dignity. Yet the charm of this story lies not only in pipes and valves, but in the gentle irony of human nature. For when the time came to honour Thomas with a celebratory dinner, an entire evening arranged in his name, he missed it. Imagine the scene, a grand hall, chandeliers glittering like icicles, long tables draped in white cloth, the air scented faintly of roast beef and stewed apples, glasses raised, a toast prepared, applause waiting to swell, and the seat for the guest of honour empty. Why? Because Thomas simply forgot. Not arrogance, not illness, just forgetfulness. One imagines him at home, poring over a stubborn drawing or sipping tea while tinkering with the cistern, the banquet entirely absent from his thoughts. Isn't that wonderfully human? Haven't we all missed a moment of our own because we were lost in details? Like forgetting your own birthday while finishing a novel, or missing fireworks because you were adjusting the blanket on the grass. In Thomas's oversight, we glimpse something comforting. Even great inventors get distracted. Let's walk for a moment through the streets of his London. Picture the cobblestones uneven beneath your shoes. Hear the distant clip-clop of a horse, its breath steaming in the chill night. Smell the mingling scents, roasted chestnuts from a street vendor, coal smoke from a dozen chimneys, damp stone walls still holding the memory of the day's rain. You stop at a vendor's cart. "Hot chestnuts, penny a bag," he calls. You take one, its shell splitting with a soft crackle, releasing a puff of steam. The nut inside is warm, soft, almost creamy, like a secret sweetness hiding in plain sight. Holding the warm bag in your hands, you wander further, past the lamplighter at his rounds. His pole touches each lamp in turn, coaxing small flames to life. One by one, the street blossoms with golden glow, as though stars themselves had come down to perch along the road. Meanwhile, in a quiet workshop nearby, Thomas Crapper adjusts the valve of a cistern. He leans closer, listening to the faint trickle, brow furrowed in concentration. His tea grows cold, forgotten beside him, and in some hall across the city people murmur, "Where is he? Surely he's on his way." But the chair remains empty. There is humour in this, yes, but also a kind of peace. Life is not only about being celebrated. Sometimes it is about the small satisfactions, the hiss of a kettle, the curve of a brass fitting, the knowledge that a design finally works. Thomas may have missed his banquet, but his legacy lives on in every flush of water that carries discomfort away. Let me draw you deeper still. Imagine the sensation of stepping into a Victorian parlour preserved as though frozen in amber. Heavy curtains block the draught. A fire crackles in the grate, shadows dancing across floral wallpaper. The armchairs are plush, almost too plush, the sort that sigh when you sink into them. On the table sits a plate of biscuits, plain shortbread, lightly sugared. You take one, bite into its crumbly texture, and the sweetness is subtle, almost shy, like a memory rather than a flavour. These were the little comforts that defined Victorian domestic life. Yet beyond those walls, London wrestled with the very basics of living together in crowded numbers. Water supply, waste disposal, public health, these were the true battlegrounds of modernity. In 1858, the year of the Great Stink, the smell of untreated sewage in the Thames grew so overpowering that even Parliament could not ignore it. Curtains were soaked in lime chloride to mask the odour, though the attempt was feeble at best. The crisis spurred investment in sewers, drains, and innovations like Crapper's. In that sense, his workshop tinkering was not trivial at all. It was part of the foundation for healthier cities. But let's not get too lost in grim facts. Instead, think of history as a loaf of bread. Some inventors kneaded the dough, some baked it, and others, like Thomas, figured out how to slice it evenly so everyone could enjoy a piece without crumbling it apart. He was not the originator of sanitation, but the man who made it accessible, reliable, every day. And isn't that where the true magic lies, in the ordinary made dependable? As we drift through this first chapter, imagine yourself both inside and outside the story. Feel the crunch of chestnuts beneath your teeth. Smell the damp cobblestones, the coal smoke, the faint sweetness of sugared shortbread. Hear the hiss of gas lamps, the murmur of a crowd waiting for a man who will never arrive. Let the details wrap around you like a blanket, not urgent, not demanding, just there, soft and steady. And remember, history need not always be grand battles or royal decrees. Sometimes it is about a man who made pipes gurgle properly, who missed his own banquet and who left behind a name that still makes people smile. So, as you rest tonight, picture Thomas Crapper leaning back in his chair, tools scattered across his workbench, unaware of the applause he's missing. Somewhere in the distance, violins play, glasses clink, and toasts are made. But here, in the quiet of his shop, all is still except the faint drip of water, steady as a lullaby. And with that sound in mind, the slow rhythm of droplets finding their way, you too can drift, calm and unhurried, into the next part of our long and winding tale. Let us slip a little further into the Victorian evening. The lamps are lit now, their glow softened by the mist that curls along London's narrow lanes. You can hear the shuffle of boots on stone, the hush of voices drifting through open tavern doors, and the distant clatter of carriage wheels echoing like a heartbeat against the damp walls. The city does not sleep easily, yet within its noise there are always pockets of quiet corners where time seems to slow and every small detail feels magnified. Picture, if you will, a small inn on the edge of Chelsea. Its sign swings gently in the night breeze, the iron hinges creaking faintly with each sway. Step inside and you are welcomed by the low roar of a fire, the scent of roasting meat, and the warm chatter of patrons shaking off the chill. The floorboards groan with familiarity, and the benches are worn smooth by generations of elbows and laughter. This is not a grand banquet hall. This is a humbler place, the kind where inventions are discussed not in lectures, but over tankards of ale and plates of food steaming with comfort. Here, one might imagine Thomas Crapper himself slipping quietly into a corner unnoticed, his mind half on his meal and half on some new idea for a more efficient siphon. The food in such an inn was simple, hearty, and in its way deeply soothing. A meat pie, perhaps, crust golden, flaking at the edges, steam escaping as the knife breaks through to reveal tender chunks of beef swimming in thick gravy, or perhaps a bowl of stew, earthy with root vegetables, seasoned with little more than salt and a sprig of thyme. Imagine spooning it slowly, each mouthful warming the body from the inside out, the flavours humble yet satisfying, like a lullaby you can taste. And for a sweet bite there might be suet pudding, dense and filling, a far cry from today's airy cakes. It was the kind of dessert that sat heavily, reassuringly, as though it were tucking you in itself. Victorians had a fondness for such fare, meals that were practical as well as pleasurable, much like their own approach to invention. Now, let me share with you a curious little truth. While Thomas was perfecting the flush system, other Victorians were just as busy refining recipes that would become staples of British comfort. Take the humble digestive biscuit, for example. Invented in 1839 by two Scottish doctors, it was meant as a health food, to aid in digestion with its blend of wholemeal flour and baking soda. Imagine that. A biscuit designed not for indulgence, but for balance. And yet how many of us today dip one into tea, savouring its mild sweetness, never thinking of the medical intentions behind it? History is full of these quiet ironies, practical inventions that become sources of joy, and celebrations that go unattended because their honoree is lost in thought elsewhere. Doesn't it make you wonder how many of our own small habits will seem charmingly odd 100 years from now? Let your mind linger a moment on the atmosphere of that Chelsea inn, the crackle of the fire, logs shifting as they release sparks that drift upward like tiny stars, the soft clink of cutlery, the low rumble of laughter, and the occasional cheer as a new round of ale is poured. Outside, the fog presses against the windows, making the glow within seem even warmer. You sit at a wooden table, the surface scarred by years of use. Your fingers trace the grooves absent-mindedly as a plate is set before you. A slice of treacle-tart golden crust holding in the sticky sweetness of syrup, breadcrumbs, and a hint of lemon. The first bite is rich and comforting, the kind of sweetness that spreads slowly rather than overwhelming at once. You chew, swallow, and feel the warmth settle into you like a friendly hand on your shoulder. And perhaps across the room Thomas raises his own fork, though his thoughts are elsewhere. He chews slowly, nodding absently at something his companion says, his mind circling around the question of water pressure or the angle of a pipe. This is the charm of his story. Even at a table full of food and friends, he is never far from the workshop in his imagination. But let's step out again, into the street, where the air is crisp and smells faintly of damp earth. Somewhere nearby, a bakery is finishing its day's work, the scent of bread still clinging to the bricks. Imagine the warmth of a loaf just pulled from the oven, the crust crackling as it cools. Tear off a piece, and the inside is soft, steaming, almost melting against your tongue. Bread, the simplest of foods, and yet the foundation of countless lives. It is in such humble comforts that we find the heart of history, not in battles or speeches, but in what people ate, how they warmed themselves, how they lived day by day. The Victorians, for all their starch collars and strict manners, were not so different. They craved sweetness, warmth, comfort. They enjoyed roasted chestnuts on a winter's street and plum puddings heavy with the spices during Christmas. They laughed in taverns, they dozed in parlours, They missed dinners they were meant to attend. Their world was full of noise and soot, but also of the same small joys we know today. And so, as we walk with them, let us pause again to savour a moment. Imagine sipping from a porcelain cup of tea, the liquid dark and bitter but softened by a cube of sugar. The steam rises, fogging your vision for a heartbeat before clearing. You lean back, listening to the rhythmic crackle of the fireplace, the gentle murmur of voices that blur together into a soothing hum. Time seems slower here, as though the city outside has paused to let you rest. This, dear listener, is the rhythm I invite you into. The slow unfolding of history not as a lecture but as a lullaby. The flush toilet, the digestive biscuit, the treacle tart, the missed banquet, all of it woven together into the fabric of life that was neither glamorous nor grand but endlessly human. And as you let your eyes grow heavy, remember this. History is never just dates and names. It is the clink of a spoon against a ceramic bowl, the sigh of someone forgetting an appointment, the sweetness of a chestnut on a cold night. It is, in essence, the story of us. So let us drift onward, from this warm inn and its golden glow into the misty streets beyond. Ahead lies more to taste, more to smell, more to hear, and always more to soothe. Step quietly, breathe deeply, and allow the story to carry you, like water flowing gently through polished pipes into the next chapter of our wandering tale. The night drifts on, soft and steady, like the slow pull of a tide against the shore. London, in the mid-Victorian years, is never truly silent. Even as gas lamps burn low and shutters are drawn, there is always the hum of life beneath the fog. A milk cart rattles down a narrow lane, its wheels groaning with each bump. Somewhere, a dog barks, quick and sharp before falling quiet again. The city breathes in a way that is strangely comforting, like a giant machine whose cogs turn even while its people sleep. Now, let us step gently into a different kind of room. Not the workshop of Thomas Crapper this time, nor the tavern of warm pies and hearty laughter, but a genteel drawing room, dressed in all the frills and flourishes of Victorian taste. The wallpaper is patterned with vines and roses, looping endlessly in soft, repetitive designs. Heavy velvet curtains block the draught, pooling on the carpet in thick folds. A clock ticks on the mantel, steady and calm, marking the minutes with a soft click as the fire in the grate crackles faintly. Here, a plate of sweets sits waiting on a polished table. Perhaps they are comfits, sugar-coated seeds that crunch gently when bitten. Or perhaps they are barley sugars, amber-coloured and glossy, shaped into spirals that catch the light. Imagine taking one, letting it rest on your tongue, its sweetness dissolving slowly, like honey stretching itself thin. These were the simple delights of a Victorian parlour, sweets meant to be savoured slowly as conversations drifted from one polite topic to another. And yet, outside such rooms, the city itself was less sweet. The problem of sanitation pressed on, growing louder with each passing year. By 1854, London had endured outbreaks of cholera so severe that entire districts mourned their dead. At the time, many believed in miasma, the idea that disease spread through foul-smelling air. They were not entirely wrong, for where the air smelled foul, sewage often seeped into water supplies. But it would take careful observation, like that of Dr. John Snow in Soho, to trace the real culprit: contaminated water. Why bring this up in a sleepy tale? Because it was into this world of worry and sickness that inventions like the flush toilet quietly shifted the balance. Each improvement, each adjustment of a valve or a siphon nudged society closer to a world where disease was less rampant and dignity more secure. And so, while some Victorians sipped tea and nibbled sweets in velvet-draped parlours, others like Thomas were reshaping the unseen system beneath their feet. But let's not dwell too much on illness. Instead, let's taste again the comfort of food that soothed Victorian households. Imagine, for instance, a slice of seed cake. It was a common treat, flavoured with caraway seeds, crumbly and fragrant. You bite into it, and the texture is light yet filling, the seeds releasing their faintly aniseed note with each chew. It is not overly sweet, just balanced, the sort of cake that makes you feel both indulged and nourished. Jane Austen herself once mentioned seed cake in her letters, and it lingered well into the Victorian years as a symbol of modest comfort. Can you picture the scene? A group of guests gathered around a table, their hands holding delicate china cups, steam rising in thin ribbons from their tea. A slice of seed cake rests on a saucer, crumbs already gathering at the edges. Conversation flows politely. The weather, the latest serial installment from Mr. Dickens, perhaps a new contraption spotted in a shop window. Outside, the city creaks with change. Railways expanding, factories churning, but here, inside, time feels slower, steadier, softened by tea and cake, and yet, even in such genteel settings, the whispers of progress crept in. Someone might mention the new water closets being installed in certain houses. Imagine the ripple of curiosity, a flush of water, so convenient, so modern, but also so peculiar. For centuries, people had managed with chamber pots and outhouses. The idea of bringing such matters indoors was unsettling to some, even scandalous. Change, after all, is never without resistance. Perhaps one lady shakes her head, insisting that nothing could be more improper than placing such a contraption within a home. Another, more forward-thinking, leans in with interest, asking about the mechanism, the clever siphons and valves. And Thomas, if he were present, might simply smile and sip his tea, knowing that practicality would in the end win over propriety. History has a way of balancing itself like this. The clash of old habits with new ideas, the tug-of-war between comfort and tradition. And in the meantime, people still needed their seed cake, their barley sugars, their biscuits to carry them through the long evenings. Now, let's step briefly into a kitchen. The hearth glows, pots simmer gently, and the air is thick with scents, onions softening in butter, bread baking in the oven, perhaps a pot of jam bubbling with raspberries or gooseberries. The kitchen cat curls near the warmth, its fur rising and falling with each breath. A maid kneads dough on the floured table, the rhythm steady, almost hypnotic. Push, fold, turn, push, fold, turn. The bread will be ready in the morning and its scent will linger long after. Food and invention were not so different, you see. Both required patience, trial, error and repetition until the right balance was found. Just as a cook adjusted seasoning, Thomas adjusted fittings. Just as bread had to rise before it could be baked, so too did ideas need time to prove themselves. And as you imagine this kitchen warmth, consider how it contrasts with the cold fog outside. There is comfort in contrasts. Hot against cold, sweet against savoury, silence against noise. Even history is remembered more vividly because of its contrasts. The filth of streets against the shine of new plumbing, the gloom of sickness against the laughter in parlours, the emptiness of a banquet chair against the fullness of a workshop desk. The Victorian world was full of such juxtapositions. Coal soot on lace curtains, railways roaring past quiet meadows, industrial smog against the delicate sweetness of a barley sugar. Life was never entirely one thing or another. It was both, woven together. So, as you lie back now, listening, let yourself sink into that blend. The clatter of a city mixed with the hush of a parlour, the sweetness of seed cake on your tongue, the faint echo of a flush in a newfangled water closet, still novel enough to be discussed over tea. And in the background always the quiet hum of invention carrying on, whether or not its inventor remembered to attend his own celebration. And as we leave this chapter, imagine walking out of that drawing room, past the velvet curtains and ticking clocks, through the misty streets once more. Your pockets carry the scent of sweets, your shoes the echo of cobblestones. Ahead more stories wait, each as ordinary and extraordinary as the last. Let us drift toward them slowly, calmly, as though history itself were lulling us to sleep. Imagine the morning after, when London stirs again from its restless night. The fog still hangs low, but it is thinner now, like gauze pulled across the rooftops. Chimneys exhale their steady streams of coal smoke, and the air hums faintly with the sounds of vendors beginning their day. A man pushes a cart of fresh bread, the loaves stacked high, their crusts browned and still warm from the oven. A woman in a shawl calls out for milk, holding a small tin pail. Somewhere, church bells toll softly, reminding the city that time, as always, marches forward. In such mornings, the Victorians sought their comfort in the simple ritual of breakfast. Picture the table, a pot of tea steaming gently, slices of bread laid neatly on a plate, a pat of butter softening on a dish of cool porcelain, eggs boiled until firm, their shells tapping lightly under the spoon. And sometimes, if fortune allowed, a slice of kippered herring, smoky, salty, filling. To us, it may seem an unusual choice for breakfast, but to them, it was hearty fuel for the day. Now, pause with me here and imagine biting into that bread. The crust crunches faintly, giving way to the soft interior. Spread with butter, it melts almost instantly, warm and rich. Add a dab of marmalade, bitter orange, sharp against the sweetness, and suddenly your mouth awakens fully. This was the balance the Victorians cherished. Sturdy fare, enlivened with small bursts of flavour. And as they ate, conversations continued about the marvels of the age. The Great Exhibition of 1851 still shimmered in collective memory, an event where glass palaces displayed inventions of every shape and size. Steam engines, sewing machines, and even early flush toilets were shown off as symbols of progress. Imagine the excitement, the wide-eyed wonder of stepping into the Crystal Palace, sunlight streaming through sheets of glass, illuminating objects that seemed pulled from dreams. Yet, like Thomas Crapper himself, many inventors remained humble, almost shy. They were not celebrated as celebrities are today. More often, they were quiet craftsmen, tucked away in workshops, perfecting details no one noticed until they failed. Isn't that a soothing thought? That progress does not always come in trumpets and banners, but in the steady turn of a wrench, the gentle tightening of a joint, the careful sketch on a scrap of paper. As we linger in this morning scene, the soundscape changes. Hear the clatter of hooves as carriages begin to crowd the streets. Hear the calls of newspaper boys, their voices high and insistent. Times, Morning Chronicle, all the news. The rustle of paper joins the symphony of sound. And if you were to pick up a paper yourself, you might see advertisements for new household conveniences. Soap powders, patent medicines, even improved water closets. Marketing was not so different then as it is now. The promise was always that life could be made easier, cleaner, better. But let's not be swept too quickly into the noise of commerce. Instead, let us return to the breakfast table, where the fire burns low in the grate, and a plate of toast rests beside a dish of jam. The jam glistens ruby red, perhaps strawberry or raspberry, seeds catching faintly between your teeth as you take a bite. The sweetness lingers, the tang bright, the toast itself crackling under your fingers as you hold it. These were the everyday luxuries that steadied people against the harder edges of the world outside. Think for a moment of how such small comforts echo across time. Today we too sit at tables with warm drinks and simple foods, finding calm in the ordinary. The act itself has not changed so much. The clink of a spoon, the sigh of steam, the bite of something sweet. It is almost as though across centuries we share the same table, separated only by details of dress and decor. Now, a curious detail about Thomas Crapper's business. His shop, located in Chelsea, was unusual for its time. Unlike many tradesmen, he displayed his products openly in windows, cisterns, toilets, fittings, inviting passers-by to look at them as though they were fine wares. Some considered it indecent, even scandalous, to exhibit such things so publicly, and yet the strategy worked. Curiosity drew customers in, and soon the very idea of indoor plumbing was reshaped from a private embarrassment into a point of pride. Imagine peering into that shop window. Brass fittings gleam, pipes are stacked neatly, cisterns polished to a shine. The glass reflects the foggy street behind you, the lamplight above casting soft glows across the display. To us, perhaps, it seems mundane, but to a Victorian passer-by, it must have been a small glimpse of the future, a whisper that life could be made not only tolerable, but more comfortable. Doesn't it remind you of looking into a bakery window today? Rows of pastries, each one familiar yet inviting. You may not need them, but you feel drawn in all the same. The Victorian eye saw fittings and pipes. Ours sees croissants and eclairs. Different objects, same impulse to look, to wonder, to imagine them as part of our lives. And speaking of bakeries, let's wander briefly into one. The air is warm, fragrant with flour, yeast and sugar. Loaves line the shelves, their crusts dark and ridged. On the counter, a tray of Chelsea buns glistens with sticky syrup, their spirals studded with currants. Take one in your hand, feel the glaze tacky against your fingers, bite in and let the sweetness spread across your tongue. These buns were a treat named for the very district where Thomas kept his shop. Isn't it fitting that invention and sweetness should share the same space? The bun softens as you chew, the currants lending tiny bursts of tartness amid the sugar. And in that bite you taste a fragment of Victorian life. Not the soot, not the fog, but the indulgence that made such hardships easier to bear. Now, let us step back once more. The morning grows brighter, though the sun remains filtered by haze. London moves forward, as it always does, its heart beating beneath layers of stone, soot and ambition. And within this motion, a plumber tinkers, a baker kneads, a child licks jam from their fingers. Life is never only about the grand and the glorious. It is about breakfasts, shop windows, missed banquets and Chelsea buns. So, as you rest here, let the scene settle in your mind. The fire crackling low, the bread warm in your hand, the street outside humming with early energy. And remember, history is not only read in books, it is tasted, smelled, touched, lived. Each crumb, each clink, each forgotten appointment is part of the story. And now, as we leave this chapter, imagine yourself stepping once more into the fog, the last bite of bun still sweet on your tongue. Ahead lies another street, another scene, another layer of history waiting to lull you deeper into calm. Let us drift toward it, softly, slowly, like steam rising from a pot of tea. I like to think of London's morning as a kettle just reaching the edge of a boil, quiet at first, then a soft crescendo of sound as steam begins to whisper. The sky is a grey teacup turned upside down, and the city, still wrapped in its shawl of mist, yawns itself awake. I pull my coat a little closer, feel the cool damp on the fabric, and drift toward the river where the day has already begun in earnest. The stones underfoot are slick, and the air smells of cold iron, wet rope, and the briny snap of tide. Seagulls draw pale arcs against the dim light, their calls bright as pins. Somewhere nearby a bell clanks, not insistently, just enough to say, yes, the morning is here, Billingsgate is stirring. Have you ever walked into a market so alive that you forgot you were tired? Barrows, baskets, crates, and the soft thud of wooden boxes set down on stone, each sound a chapter in a book you somehow already know. Men in wool caps move with practiced grace, knives flashing like quick thoughts. The fish gleam, silver mackerel, dusky cod, and long muscular eels that look as if the river itself has been braided into lengths and brought ashore. The air is an ocean folded into a small space, salting even your breath. I pause by a stall where the eelman works with a rhythm that feels almost musical. His blade flicks, the eel turns, and a spiral of movement becomes neatly cut pieces that land soft as sighs in a tin tray. He looks up, nods, and with a motion that says he has done this 1,000 times, he spoons a glistening portion into a small bowl. Jellied eels, London's odd lullaby. Vinegar stands at the ready, a bright little wake-up that snaps along your tongue. I dip my spoon and taste. It is cool and quivering, savoury in a way that lingers, the texture more tender than you'd expect, like a savoury jelly that someone persuaded into behaving itself. Isn't it funny what comfort looks like from one century to the next? Today we reach for custard cups and tubs of yoghurt. Then they reach for eel set in shimmering aspic. Different shapes, same aim, something that sits kindly in the stomach and tells the day to be gentle. There's a kind of magic in eating something you might never have chosen on your own. You feel brave and a little amused with yourself, as if you've joined a secret club whose membership card is a spoon and an open mind. The eel is delicate, not the thunderclap I'd imagined, more like a cello note that hums just beneath hearing. I add a dash more vinegar and a sprinkle of white pepper, and it becomes a brighter thing, suddenly lively, suddenly talkative. Have you ever noticed how a tiny addition can change the entire mood of a dish? The way a lampshade changes the colour of a room. Across the way, A woman with cheeks ruddy from the cold lifts lids on covered tins and reveals another hush-hush favourite. Calves' foot jelly, the Victorian equivalent of a chandelier you could eat. It trembles in the dish as if deciding whether to be solid or a memory. A spoonful on the tongue turns to liquid clarity, savoury but delicate, like soup thinking about being dessert and then remembering its manners. People then swore by it for strength and healing, the way we speak of bone broth now. Different words, same tenderness for the fatigued and the frail. And then, the surprise page in our market morning, a hand pie stall, steam curling upward in gentle threads. The pies are small and warm, their crimped edges catching the light. I hold one in my hands and feel it hum with heat. Meat and onion, maybe potato and a whisper of thyme? I bite and the crust gives with a polite flake, revealing gravy that behaves with the dignity of a butler, present, helpful, but never spilling beyond what's necessary. If you've ever wanted to know what the Victorian closest thing to a modern hot pocket was, here it is, only this one wears a waistcoat and says good morning before it feeds you. Isn't that a friendly thought to carry? As the market breathes around me, I think of Thomas Crapper moving through mornings like this. Not for fish, perhaps, but for fittings. Imagine him glancing at the metalwork on the crates, admiring a hinge, the way a clasp sits flush, seeing pipes coiled at a cooper's stall, and considering how differently they'd behave with a gentle bend, a steadier valve. If some grand committee had planned to honour him that evening, imagine a ticket in his pocket, invitation embossed and official. Couldn't you also imagine him simply forgetting it while watching a fishmonger's efficient hands? It's wonderfully human to be hypnotised by small perfections. And now, a sweetness drift to balance our savoury dawn. I turn from fish and copper and step into a bakery's buttery perfume. The door gives a soft complaint, a bell tinkles, and warmth wraps around me like a heavy shawl. Flour hangs in the sunbeams like snow that chose to hover. On the counter, jam roly-poly, a rolled suet pudding striped with ruby jam. It looks like a cosy scroll or a sleeping cat curled around a secret. The slice lands on a plate with a soft thud. I dip the fork in, and the jam yields sticky and tart, ribboning through the warm plush crumb. If a cinnamon roll took off its cinnamon coat and put on a layer of jammy pyjamas, this would be the result. Comfort in spiral form. The baker, sleeves dusted with flour, smiles without stopping her hands. Best warm, she says, as though we didn't already know. I taste and time slows, the jam bright as a lantern in a fog, the suet crumb more tender than its sturdy name suggests. Do you have a dessert that tastes like a private joke between you and your childhood? Roly-poly has that energy, like a hand-me-down lullaby. On the shelf beside it sits Spotted Dick, a name that still makes modern diners blink and choke back laughter. But set the name aside, and you have suet pudding dotted with currants, sweetened with the memory of raisins and sunshine. A slice with custard is a Victorian hug. The custard itself is a slow river, pouring in a soft ribbon, pooling with dignity, gathering in the tiny valleys between currants until each bite becomes a small song. The first spoonful is mellow and warm, the second seems almost polite, and by the third you're whispering to the plate, promising you'll be back soon. I know. Talking to dessert is a very specific habit. But who among us hasn't confided in a slice of cake at least once? Shall we anchor our wandering with a page from the era's cookbook? In 1861, Mrs. Beeton's Book of Household Management was first published, and suddenly half of Britain had a kitchen oracle they could consult between the tea caddy and the spice drawer. Imagine the satisfaction of being told in neat print exactly how to boil, bake, or stew. With a book like that, the Victorian kitchen became a laboratory of comfort. Puddings puffed properly, sauces thickened obediently, and pies kept a tidy shape even when the world outside felt far less manageable. It's soothing, isn't it, to know that somewhere someone has written instructions that calm the chaos? Outside again, the market's murmur has deepened into a hum. Carts creak away, nets coil back into orderly nests, and the gulls, having collected their share of stories, wheel higher toward a sky that has decided to brighten. I tuck a small paper packet of something sweet into my pocket. Sugar almonds, glossy and pink like tiny lanterns. and let myself drift along the riverside where ropes thud against wooden posts and water pats the stone with a tender hand. If the city is a machine, the Thames is its lullaby, repeating itself until even the hurried feet begin to soften their step. Curious, though, how comfort arranges itself in layers. We've had the eel, a savoury jelly that wears courage on its sleeve. We've had pies, hand-sized and heart-steadying. We've had puddings that insist the world is kinder than newsprint suggests. Somewhere between all those bites, the story of sanitation threads its quiet way, as unseen as the pipes beneath our boots. Perhaps Thomas, after pausing at the window of a bakery to admire the golden glow of roly-poly, turns down a narrow lane to check a house's new cistern. Perhaps he steps into an entryway fragrant with furniture polish and damp wool, and listens, truly listens, to the patient story a pipe is telling him. A hiss, a stutter, a satisfied gurgle. The city speaks in water, and he's one of the few who learned its grammar. I pass a tea shop where cups clink like tiny bells, and the air tastes of steam and lemon peel. The proprietor offers a slice of lemon drizzle to go with a cup of black tea that looks like evening in a glass. The cake is moist and sunny, the glaze a thin, bright whisper atop the crumb. Is there anything more comforting than a citrus note sneaking into a grey day and hanging a small yellow ribbon on your mood? The Victorians adored their tea time because it made a ceremony out of the ordinary. A pause with rules, yes, but also with sweetness. The practiced pour, the delicate cup, the little plate that says, "You have come far enough for now, sit." And if tea is a pause, then bread is the slow heartbeat of the day. I wander past a doorstep where loaves cool on a rack, and a cat, fur the colour of old parchment, keeps watch as if appointed to the task. I tear a thumb-sized piece from a heel and press it between finger and palm. The crust whispers, the crumb sighs. A smear of butter turns it into a small miracle that doesn't need a witness, only a grateful mouth. Bread in one hand, I think again about how progress often arrives dressed like simplicity. A kettle that whistles, a lamp that lights with a match, a toilet that flushes without drama. You never notice the beautiful ones until they fail you, and then, oh, how they become the centre of the stage. We have wandered, you and I, from river to market to bakery, but every step has been part of the same quiet parade, the ordinary made noble by care. Even gelid eels, sparkling faintly in the pale morning, are a love letter to thrift and flavour. If you were to carry a small forkful back through time to an Elizabethan dinner, someone there might recognise the spirit, if not the taste. Resourceful, gleaming, a dish that refuses to apologise for where it comes from. What food in your own life does that for you, stands up straight and says, "I am exactly what I am, and that is enough"? A boy passes with a tray of hot cross buns, though it is not Easter. Rules loosen when comfort calls. The buns are marked with pale crosses that look like fog drawn with a fingertip. I take one, and the currents of spice, cinnamon, nutmeg, something warm and shy, rise to greet me. Raisins pop like little time capsules. If pastries had lullabies, this one would hum at the edge of hearing, keeping the mind company without asking it to think. Near a shop window I catch my reflection, scarved, a bit flour-dusted, quite content, and behind me, displayed with unexpected pride, stands a gleaming porcelain bowl atop a stout pedestal, a water closet posed like sculpture. The sign is discreet but confident. New fittings, easy flush, reliable seal. I smile at the audacity of selling privacy in public and wonder how many pedestrians blush, then step inside anyway to ask the price. Thomas changed more than pipes. He changed the way the city let itself talk about what it prefers to keep behind doors. That's progress too, the turning of taboo into technicality. Just as a final nibble, because we have become gourmands of calm, let me offer you a ginger biscuit pressed into your hand by a kindly grocer. Snap. The sound is crisp, like the corner of a page being turned. Heat unfurls from the ginger, gentle at first, then warmer. Then you realise your fingertips are tingling, your breath is deeper, and the river's breeze feels friendlier than before. What a neat trick for a small circle of dough to perform. And with biscuit crumbs friendly in the pocket, the market thinning, and the river ever repeating its lull, we can begin to step back from the morning. Pause with me on a small bridge. Below, the water carries reflections like slow-moving postcards. Somewhere a train, new and brave, breathes its announcement underground. Somewhere a baker slides fresh loaves onto a shelf and counts how many will make it to noon. Somewhere a plumber wipes his hands on a cloth and thinks the faint hiss he hears might not be a problem but a promise kept. Do you feel your shoulders soften? The day is fully awake now, but we don't have to be. We can drift as the city moves around us, content to watch its gentle gears turn. And if, this evening, someone lights a chandelier over a table and raises a glass to a man who made water behave, well, perhaps he'll be in a shop window somewhere, admiring brass and porcelain, forgetting the fuss and smiling to himself about a mechanism that finally works. And as we leave the riverside, pockets sugared by almonds, lips kissed with lemon and ginger, minds steadied by the idea that comfort is a kind of quiet engineering, let your thoughts stroll ahead to a calmer street, a softer room, another little scene waiting to be noticed. Listen for a kettle's first whisper, watch for a curtain breathing in and out, and follow me unhurried as we step from the market's glow into the next fold of the evening story, where new flavours and old inventions are waiting with patient smiles. The river is our ribbon tonight, a long glinting thread laced through the city's heavy cloth. I stand with you on the edge of the Thames as dusk loosens its colours into the water, and the air carries that familiar duet of coal and tide, rough and salty like a woolen scarf dipped in the sea. Lamps wink into being along the embankment, each one a small promise that the dark will be gentle, not sudden. Footsteps pass in soft pairs, the hush of skirts, the tap of canes, the murmur of voices leaning closer against the breeze. If you listen carefully, there is another sound beneath it all, a distant, orderly heartbeat that is new to this century. Water moving on command. Pipes hum below the pavement like low violas, the city practicing its scales. It's a fine place for a stroll, this stretch along the water, neater now than it used to be, more decided. Not long after the great stink of 1858 sent even Parliament scrambling for fresh air, work began in 1859 on an ambitious web of sewers and embankments to tame what the river had been too patient about for too long. Imagine the relief. Brick tunnels curving like the inside of a shell, brick upon brick, each one set with a plumber's patience. I love that word. Patience. Because it's what links the mason to the baker, the sewer builders to the pastry makers, and our Thomas, with his valves and siphons, to anyone who's ever waited for a custard to thicken without curdling. We walk slowly, letting the evening unspool. Ahead, a barrow glows under a lantern's halo, and the vendor's hands are quick and practiced over a tray of Eccles cakes. Do you know them? Small, flaky moons filled with spiced currants, named for a town but beloved by a city. I buy one warm from the pan, and the pastry shatters pleasantly at the edges, flakes catching the light like confetti that knows how to whisper. The filling is dark and fruity, the spices shy at first and then companionable, and as I chew, the heat threads up into my face until my cheeks feel like they've been politely pinched. If a pocket watch could be eaten, all wound sweetness and punctual comfort, it might taste like this. Across the way, a man sells pickled walnuts, Victorian conversation starters in a jar. He lifts one with tongs and lays it on a slice of bread spread with a soft cheese. The walnut is black as polished boots, glossy and mysterious. I take a bite and find it unexpectedly tender, sour salt and woodsy, the kind of flavour that makes eyebrows rise in surprise and then settle in approval. It's an odd delicacy, to be sure, but the Victorians respected the economy of transformation. If something could be made delicious with vinegar, spices and thyme, it would be. Doesn't that sound a lot like engineering? You take what exists, add patience and precision, and discover it behaves more elegantly than before. The lamps bob in the river as the breeze plays along the surface. I tell you softly that the city's china, those porcelain basins that gleam like winter moons, comes from the same stubborn marriage of craft and chemistry. In the early decades of the 19th century, bone china matured into its delicate strength in Staffordshire kilns. Bone ash, clay, and feldspar coaxed together until translucent bowls rang with a clear note when tapped. Imagine that note sounding in a quiet showroom in Chelsea where a certain plumber had the audacity to set his bowls, cisterns and fittings in the front window like jewellery. People paused. They looked. Some blushed, some laughed, some went home thinking, perhaps. Progress wears porcelain sometimes. A street singer appears, hat in hand, voice soft enough not to startle the river. His tune drifts around us like steam from a kettle, a sentimental ballad about leaving and returning, about the old neighbourhood made new. I find that's our story too, leaving the familiar way of things and returning with something improved, even if the improvement seems shy at first. The singer tips his hat, I tip a coin, and we carry on, the melody pocketed with the warm Eccles cake crumbs. Let us tuck into a small supper room, a narrow place with frosted windows and a brass rail, where the mirrors have that lovely habit of multiplying candlelight until the room becomes a friendly constellation. The menu nods to fashion and thrift alike. I choose mock turtle soup, a favourite of the era that promised the grandeur of turtle by way of calves' head and herbs. It arrives with a calm gleam, gelatin-rich, savoury as a library, the surface pricked with a few bright dots of fat. The first spoonful is velvet. The second reveals lemon and sherry and the affectionate insistence of long-simmered stock. It's clever, this dish. A kitchen's wink, like a tailor cutting a gentleman's coat from practical cloth and lining it with something sly and silk. Beside it, a small plate of oysters, because the Thames, cleaner now in places and otherwise supplied by coastal beds, shot its briny gifts into the city's menus with cheerful regularity. In the 1860s, oysters could be cheap as a loaf of bread, the snack of dock workers and dandies alike. I tip one back, and it is the sea's own lullaby. Cold, mineral, briefly wild. If our story needed a punctuation mark right now, that bright, clean gulp is the comma that keeps the sentence from ending too soon. The proprietor, sleeves rolled and voice gentled by years of the supper trade, brings bread that tastes like patience, deep-baked, with a crust that crackles when you press it. He sets down a small saucer of anchovy paste, Victorian umami, and it spreads like a secret across the crumb. We share a smile that says some flavours arrive already wearing their winter coats. Above our table, the gas sconce breathes its quiet flame. I find myself thinking of cisterns again, how Thomas learned the moods of water the way a conductor learns a score. He refined the siphon and the valve, taught the flow to wait and then to go, to be silent until called upon. I adore that idea, that an invention can be both obedient and dignified, not unlike a good butler who appears exactly when needed and otherwise becomes part of the wallpaper. It's very Victorian to disguise the marvel behind the manners. For dessert, something simple and a little theatrical, blancmange. The wobble as it arrives is a polite curtsy. The almond perfume is tender, almost shy. It doesn't shout, it states. The spoon slides through with barely a protest, and the texture is a whisper you can taste. In a world fond of heavy puddings and spice, blancmange feels like a white flag waved at the day. Peace, peace, let us be gentle. We step back onto the embankment with stomachs soothed and minds even. The river licks the stones with the patience of a cat washing its paws. I tell you a small date because anchors are good even in soft seas. The Great Exhibition of 1851 had already taught this city to clap for mechanisms, to admire gears as one might admire a painting. It set a habit in the eye. Look at how cleverly this works. By the time a certain plumber put porcelain on display, Londoners were ready to see convenience as an art form. You can feel that same habit tonight in the way people pause beneath each lamp and glance up, as if to say, "There you are again, small son, doing your job." We wander toward a bridge. Overhead, a train escorts its windows of light across the river. Below, a boat pushes against the current with a chug so calm it could be a lullaby. Between those motions, overhead and underfoot, the city holds us steady. I like to think Thomas felt this exact steadiness on evenings when he forgot the world's applause and remembered only whether a seal was tight, a handle firm, a sound right. It's easy to miss the party when you're listening for the note only your craft can hear. Shall we share one last bite before the night deepens? A confectioner's shop is still open, its window a cabinet of little planets, sugar plums, comfits, barley sugar spirals. I choose a lemon drop which looks like a small captured sun. The first touch is tart enough to tidy your thoughts. The sweetness follows like a blanket. I hold it against my cheek for a second, chilled through the paper, then let it rest upon my tongue until time gets syrupy around the edges. If good design had a flavour, it might be this. Crisp intention, then comfort. We drift again, and I point out very softly how everything we've tasted tonight carries the same grammar as the city's new underworld of brick and pipe. Start with what's raw, simmer or set it, temper it with acid or brass, then trust it to hold. Pickled walnuts, blancmange, mock turtle, oysters, each as a lesson in patience and a reward for faith. A siphon is no different. It is simply water taught to wait for the right invitation. The wind lifts the edge of your scarf. I tuck it back in with a friend's absent-minded care. A barge moves under us, the wake making the lamps along the embankment nod in agreement. Somewhere, a window is shut against the chill, and somewhere else a kettle sings that high silver note that means come back to the table. We are not called to any table tonight but this one. The city's longboard laid with bridges and barges and the slow, inevitable course of a river that has seen everything and is shocked by nothing. Before we turn away, I offer a tiny, true thing to keep in your pocket. In 1861, the same year Mrs. Beeton's great household book first sat on kitchen shelves, the notion of a beautifully engineered domestic water closet found its stride in polite London. Showrooms, catalogues, fittings sold with pride. Dates can be dry, but they can also be lanterns. Place this one on your path whenever the story feels foggy, and it will help you see how the great and the ordinary walked side by side. We leave the river at last. Cobblestones receive our steps with their usual tact. A cat crosses our path, a little grey shadow with ideas of its own. The night has settled into that kind of quiet that isn't empty but full of tiny, excellent sounds, a latch lifting, a shoe brushed on a mat, the small watery cough of a distant bay. When we think of invention, we imagine trumpets, and yet most progress is a creak made smoother, a drip not heard, a banquet gone unmissed because the work asked for you a little longer. And as we reach the corner where our street tips into sleep, I let the last of the lemon's brightness dissolve and picture Thomas at a desk lit by one patient lamp, testing a handle. Lift, release, lift, release. Somewhere else a toast is made to him, glasses lifted in a room bright with chandeliers. But here, the city's truest applause is the hush that follows a flawless flush, the quiet proof that the mechanism is both present and polite. That is our lullaby too, a promise that some things, once set properly, will look after themselves while we rest. Let your breath fall into the river's rhythm, slow in, slower out. Keep the warm memory of pastry in your palm and the cool of porcelain at your fingertips. We will go on from here, of course we will, but not quickly. We'll blouse out into the next street, into another kitchen, into a parlour where something steams and something glows and someone says, almost to themselves, "There, that's better." And in that small sentence you can feel a whole century relaxing its shoulders. The station breathes like a slumbering giant, exhaling steam that curls around iron ribs and glass panes before drifting upward into the dark. I stand with you near the edge of the platform, where the rails hum faintly, as if remembering every journey they've ever carried. Lamps hang like patient moons, their light caught in puddles that tremble each time a porter passes with a trunk. Have you ever noticed how a railway station feels like a pocket watch turned inside out? Gears and levers and timetables, all of it ticking in the open. It's busy, yes, but the busyness has a lullaby to it. Soft clanks, low whistles, the sigh of pressure releasing, travellers speaking in wool-muffled voices. Mind the gap, and here we are, and put your scarf on, love. I'm here for the quiet pleasure of an evening train, but also for the small feast that stations provide. Victorian refreshment rooms with their own kind of theatre, tea urns that mutter like elderly uncles, plates of pork pies and Banbury cakes lined in ranks, and a woman behind the counter who could manage an army with a raised eyebrow. The glass is fogged from the warmth within. The door gives a little tinkle as I step through, and the scent of strong tea, hot metal and jam swims up to meet us. I order without thinking, because stations are where you trust your instincts. A pork pie, a Bath bun, and a cup of tea as black as the tunnel. The pork pie is small and sturdy, a little fortress of aspic and peppered meat. I tap it with the knife and the crust answers with a polite crunch. The pastry flakes, the filling is savoury and calm, and the jelly keeps everything held together like a loyal friend. If you need a metaphor for Victorian engineering in edible form, a pork pie will do. Compact, reliable, not a speck out of place. The Bath bun, on the other hand, is the extrovert. Plump, sugared, dotted with a few secret pockets of caraway and perhaps a shy currant or two. When you tear it open, steam escapes like gossip. The first bite is sweet as a compliment and just as effective at improving one's mood. I sip tea and feel the tannin set my thoughts into tidy rows. Isn't it curious how a cup can organise a whole evening? On the far wall, a timetable clacks softly as letters change, and an advertisement, painted in neat confidence, promises a superior water closet for modern homes. Imagine that. A promise of privacy shouted in public. It makes me think of our man, Thomas, who saw no reason to hide a fine fitting from daylight. He'd have liked this room, the efficiency, the order, the way the samovar hisses exactly when asked and not a second too soon. Somewhere tonight, he might be on a similar platform, ticket folded into his waistcoat, bound for a country house to check a tricky cistern. Perhaps he pauses at a bench to double-check a little sketch. Perhaps he forgets where he's meant to be in an hour. The city has always been full of dinners. The mind has always been full of details. The whistle slides through the air like a silver thread, and we board a carriage that smells of leather, coal soot, and the faint lemon oil of someone's well-kept valise. The seats are upholstered in a pattern that looks like a tiny forest from above. I tuck my bag under my knees and press my forehead to the cool window. Outside, the platform lingers without moving. Then, as the engine leans into itself, the world begins to drift backward. Hats, lamps, a boy with a red scarf, the refreshment room shining warm as a bakery, all of it gliding away not because it moves but because we do. In motion, food tastes different. I pull from my pocket a small paper twist of comfits, sugar shells that clink like marbles. One goes into my mouth, and I let it dissolve slowly until the almond at the centre reveals itself like a secret told only once. Across from us, a gentleman unfolds a newspaper and rustles it into submission. I catch a headline about the city's improved sewers, a reminder that the subterranean is having its golden age. Dates are lanterns, so here's one to keep in your coat. The grand sweep of Joseph Bazalgette's main intercepting sewers began after the great stink of 1858 and pressed on through the 1860s into the early 1870s, a brick-walled answer to a river that had lost its patience. It is nice to think of a city setting its bones properly. The train gathers a steady clatter, a sound like cutlery politely applauding a well-timed toast. Lamps in passing cottages blur into milky beads. Hedgerows ripple like corduroy. Somewhere a dog barks at our moving constellation and then, satisfied, returns to its cushion. A porter slides the door and inquires after hot water for tea. Imagine that, tea within tea, and I say yes because on trains the answer to warmth is always yes. He returns with a small pot and the most dignified little biscuits, plain and admirable, identical in every way except the pattern left by the tin. They are the sort that crumble into well-behaved rubble and taste faintly of the reliable wheat fields that sent them here. A mother quiets a child with a lemon drop, and the small face settles into sugary concentration. Have you ever calmed yourself with a candy, promising to finish it only when you feel brave again? The train is proud of its rhythm. Our breathing begins to copy it. I look down the corridor and imagine how novelty must have felt when rails were still new. People discussing whether speed might rearrange one's organs, whether a person could think clearly while travelling faster than a well-bred horse. And yet here we are, soothed by the very thing that once scared us, our minds rocking in time with progress. Hunger returns in a friendly way because journeys always ask the stomach for company. From a hamper, borrowed, begged or bought from the refreshment room, I produce potted shrimp. The jar is small and confident, filled with Morecambe Bay's softest little crescents, cooked in butter murmuring with mace and nutmeg, then sealed under a golden lid of clarified calm. I spread a spoonful onto a slice of bread, and it glows faintly, smelling of the sea the way a seashell smells if you're patient with it. The first bite is tender, seasoned like a memory of Christmas that refuses to be loud. If toast could wear velvet, it would be this. Across the aisle, a gentleman unwraps a portion of kedgeree, smoky haddock, rice, and a polite squeeze of lemon. A recipe travelling from colonial kitchens into British breakfasts with the assurance of a well-stamped passport. He offers a forkful in that camaraderie unique to trains, and I accept. The grains are warm and separate, the fish a gentle drift of smoke, and a scatter of parsley makes the whole carriage feel fresher, as though someone opened a tiny green window. Isn't it a marvellous thing when a dish teaches you geography without a single lecture? A conductor checks our tickets with the authority of a librarian. We hand them over, and he nods in a way that approves not only our fare but our existence. He smells faintly of starch and oil, a scent that reminds me of workshops and honesty. Let's anchor another lantern here. In 1875, the Public Health Act in Britain pulled together rules for sanitation, drainage, and water supply, turning improvements from private curiosities into civic obligations. It's the sort of date that doesn't sparkle until you realise it's responsible for quiet kitchens, safe streets, and water that behaves like a friend. The train slows for a small town, and the platform offers a tray of pies as if extending a hand toward the window. I slip down, stretch my legs, and accept something called a traveller's slice, a neat rectangle of pastry with a stripe of damson jam inside. It's the closest thing to a Victorian granola bar, only this one came to the party in a waistcoat. The crust is short, the jam deep purple, slightly tart as if reminding you to stay awake just a little longer. A boy trying to look helpful offers to carry a non-existent bag. I give him the last of the comfits, which he pockets with a bow so solemn that my heart feels ironed. Back in our seat, the countryside darkens into velvet. Fires bloom here and there like tame comets in hearths. Someone's supper tosses a spicy rumour out of a chimney. I think about bathrooms, strange topic for a train of thought perhaps, but fitting all the same. Early carriages relied on long journeys ending promptly. Later, innovation brought little water closets to certain compartments, a cramped luxury whispering, "See? Even here." That's the pattern, isn't it? First the city, then the country houses, then the trains, then the world. Convenience marches outward like ripples from a dropped pebble. There is a lull, the sort that invites one last nibble, so I unpack a slice of sago pudding set firm in a tin. Children once called it frog spawn. Rude, but not entirely wrong. I laugh, spoon it out, and find it soothing as rain on a roof. The pearls wobble, the custard is modestly sweet, and Nutmeg leans over to say hello. It's an odd comfort, the kind that grows on you, the way some people do. You know the ones, quiet at first, then suddenly indispensable. I close my eyes and imagine Thomas in a second-class compartment, knee knocking a little case of tools, rehearsing in his mind the path a column of water will take. The slow fill, the dignified wait, the decisive siphon, the swift, obedient rush. He thinks about rubber seals and the angle of a lever, not out of fussiness but out of kindness. To the housemaid who will no longer carry slopping pails, to the child who will grow up unafraid of draughty night trips to a backyard privy, to the guests who will feel the luxury of privacy without ever needing to mention it. Perhaps, while he runs these thoughts, a satin envelope in his pocket sits entirely unremembered, a printed invitation to a dinner in his honour tonight, somewhere full of chandeliers and speeches. The mind cannot clap and calculate at the same time. He will send his apologies tomorrow, sincerely mystified that celebration happened without him. Our carriage lamps flicker. The porter writes them with a practised twist. The wheels sing a different note as the track changes. Have you heard it? A key turned on a piano somewhere underfoot. We begin to talk softly about nothing and everything. How a bath bun is a cousin to a cloud. How potted shrimp is the sea being polite. How the world's best convenience is the one you never have to think about. Outside, fences slide by like measured breath. Inside, the tea's last mouthful tastes of iron and bedtime. At the next stop, a woman boards with a basket of crumpets still warm from a griddle. She's headed to visit a sister and will not say no to lightening the load. I buy two. butter disappears into them as if into a well-made bed. Each bite whispers with tiny holes, those hundreds of polite little mouths saying thank you in unison. A thread of honey over the top and the whole thing becomes sunrise in private. If the city had a soundtrack, a buttered crumpet might be its soft percussion. The guard calls the last connection. Somewhere, a clock with Roman numerals considers its options and strikes with avuncular dignity. We gather our things. Isn't it pleasant how travel gives purpose to even the smallest gestures? A folded paper, a tied ribbon, a lid clicking back onto a jar, the way the window latch snaps with the confidence of a solved problem. I smooth the crumbs from my lap and feel the carriage's warmth slip into my coat, a small souvenir I'll carry down the steps. When we step onto the platform, the air smells of iron again, and of a town not yet tired of its own lamps. I see through the glass of a stationmaster's office a calendar with careful squares, one date circled for some committee's dinner, a name I can't read from here, though I pretend for a moment it's our absent-minded plumber. I send him a private toast. May your fittings fit. May your valves behave. May you always remember the joy of forgetting a party for the sake of a perfect seal. Outside, a cab waits like a patient beetle. The driver touches his hat. The horse snorts a little cloud. We slip into the city again, smaller this time, but no less earnest. Cobbles that have learned to speak softly, a bakery that still glows, a window displaying porcelain with the confidence of pearls. Somewhere above us, a kettle has just begun to murmur. Somewhere below us, 100 small rivers are doing their best work without a single spectator. I feel my shoulders unclench, as though someone has ironed the day and hung it up neatly. And as we leave the station, let your mind drift in the same steady way the train did. Forward, unhurried, certain of a warm room at the end. Perhaps there will be kippers in the morning, perhaps seed cake at noon, perhaps a new lever that clicks with the sound of a promise kept. For now, though, we can place our ticket stubs in a pocket, tuck a last comfit into the cheek and follow the lamps as they step us kindly toward the next street, the next door, the next gentle chapter waiting just around the curve. The evening has that hush I love, the kind that folds itself around you like a well-warmed shawl. So let's take a slow wander down a lane where the cobbles hold the day's heat, and the air smells faintly of coal, damp brick, and something sweet that refuses to introduce itself. I turn a corner with you, and there it is. A little pushcart with a chimney like a toy factory, puffing soft curls of steam into the night. The baked potato man stands behind it, cheeks pink, hands busy, as if the cart were a small son he tends for the neighbourhood. He lifts the lid and the breath of the cart rolls out, earthy, buttery, so reassuring it almost pats you on the shoulder. I choose a potato the size of a fist, split neatly with a knife that has seen things, and watch as butter disappears into the floury middle like a shy guest at a crowded party. A sprinkle of salt, a nudge of pepper, and if fortune smiles, a spoon of beef dripping, thrifty, glossy, unapologetically comforting. I hold the hot paper in my palms and think, this is the Victorian answer to cold fingers and a long walk. A pocket heater you can eat. If a modern jacket potato is a cosy sweater, this one is a woolen greatcoat with brass buttons that says, "Stand close, love. Will be warm in a moment. Bite." The skin crackles softly, the inside is cloud-light, and the butter makes a quiet speech about kindness. Do you have a food that doesn't demand attention so much as keep it company? This is that. And it makes me smile to imagine Thomas Crapper, passing by on his way from a job deciding he's earned one. Perhaps he leans against a lamppost, warming his hands, not yet remembering that someone somewhere has laid a place for him under a chandelier and written his name in curly script. The mind can only hold so many valves and banquets at once. Tonight, it chooses potatoes. Reasonable choice, really. Across the street, a toffee man works a slab of amber on a marble board, tapping it with a little hammer so the whole lane becomes a xylophone. He drops a shard into my palm. Sticky, precise. A tiny window pane that tastes like Sunday best. It snaps between my teeth with a prim little crunch, and the sweetness blooms slow, like a lantern brightening with every step. I think of how Victorians loved this gentle theatre. Food that announced itself with a sound. Tap of toffee, crackle of roast chestnuts, whisper of hot bread torn in two. The city was noisy, yes, but the foods that comforted it learned to speak softly. Let me tuck a small true date in your pocket, just enough to glint without waking you. In 1863, the Metropolitan Railway opened in London, the world's first underground railway, and suddenly the city could slide beneath itself like a bookmark. Isn't that a kind of magic? Pipes and tunnels and the steady insistence that movement and cleanliness belong to everyone, not only to the houses that could afford a courtyard pump. Somewhere between that first train rolling through smoky brick and the neat click of a well-made cistern, you can hear the century teaching itself good manners. We pass a coffee stall with cups stacked like little hats, and a kettle that murmurs as if telling stories to itself. I wrap my hands around a tin mug and let the heat climb my wrists. The coffee is bracing, a velvet shove. On a plate sit slices of dripping toast, bread brushed with the glossy afterthoughts of roasting, salted just so. I try one, and it is exactly what a lamplighter might dream of at the end of his laddered rounds. Crisp edge, soft heart, savoury warmth that says almost home. If a grilled cheese and a roast dinner ever had a very sensible child, dripping toast would be it. The closest thing to a hot pocket? Perhaps. Only this one straightens its tie and quotes Mrs. Beeton on thrift. Speaking of her, the famous book, The Book of Household Management, first printed in 1861, sat on so many shelves that kitchens began to breathe in paragraphs. There's comfort in that, a world that can be footnoted. Take one potato, bake until forgiving, apply butter as needed. You and I might smile at the formalities, but I admit the tone is soothing. It's the same calm authority you feel from a cleverly designed flush. No fuss, no speech, just the satisfying hush of a job well done. A thin rain begins, the sort that makes the lamps look taller. The potato man pulls his cap lower, the toffee man covers his slab with a cloth, and I think of water again. How, when coached, it behaves. When neglected, it writes its own agenda across streets and lungs. The Victorians were learning, house by house, street by street, to speak water's language. Slope the pipe, seal the trap, let the cistern breathe but not gossip. It's strangely restful to imagine Thomas in a back room, listening to a drip as if it were practicing scales. Again, he'd say to the world, and the world eventually would learn the note. Before we slip away, one more little bite. A currant bun bought hurriedly from a baker closing his shutters. It's still warm, still smells like someone's idea of morning even though the stars are up. I split it, smear a streak of butter, and the raisins wink like tiny medals. Sweet, simple, the bun is the friend who walks you to your door without asking for a story. I like friends like that. And so, let's turn down a quieter lane now, the kind where a cat patrols the fence tops and curtains move like slow breath. Hold the last heat of the potato a little longer. Let the toffee finish its song against your teeth. Imagine a room with a small fire, a chair that forgives your day, and water that will, when asked, do its quiet work and leave you in peace. We'll step inside, ease the door on its hinge, and in that soft click, hear the city promise. More warmth soon, more kindness soon, more small, steady improvements. Like steps on a staircase that was always there, we just hadn't found the light. Now rest your hands. The night has enough lamps to see us home, and the next corner holds another ordinary wonder, waiting politely for its turn. The night is cooler now, the kind that brushes your cheeks as if to say, time to head toward lamplight. I take you with me down a crescent of shops where windows glow like small aquariums of warmth. Bakery, bookseller, a milliner arranging ribbons like slow fireworks, and between them, a little cart with a brass urn and a tin of miracles, ices. The vendor's breath frosts as he smiles, and the scoop sounds like a soft bell against the tub, tap, scrape, tap, before settling a pale curl of lemon ice into a small glass cup. This is the Victorian penny lick, the kind served in thick glass dishes meant to be reused. I hold the weight of it in my palm, feel the cold slide up my fingers, and taste. Sharp lemon, quick sweetness, a chill that tidies the mind. If a thought could wear linen, it would taste like this. We share a knowing glance about the era's contradictions, elegance with a side of, is that sanitary? Authorities were already frowning by the 1890s at these shared glasses, nudging vendors toward paper or wafers. Progress, once again, practicing its please and thank you. I lean against a shopfront where the paint smells faintly of turpentine and watch the street pour itself past. A violin somewhere draws a ribbon of sound through the fog. A pieman wheels his tray, lids rattling softly. A girl with ink on her fingers laughs at a joke we don't catch. Have you noticed how cities whisper best at this hour, when shop bells are tired and boots learn to walk more quietly? It's like listening to a house settle, creaks you trust. To balance our lemon chill, we duck into a cake shop that glows like a hearth. Inside, the glass domes are little moons, and beneath one rests a Victoria sponge, layered with jam and a cloud of cream. I order a slice and it lands with a gentle thud, the dusting of sugar looking like first snow. Bite. Soft crumb, bright jam, cream that behaves like good conversation. Light, kind, leaving you happier than before. It became a darling during Queen Victoria's reign, 1837-1901. And you can taste why. Not flashy, just confident in its tenderness. If the city had a handshake, it might be this sponge. Firm enough, but warm. At the counter, the bell twitches as a new customer enters. A man with tool-blackened nails tucked into neat gloves. He orders tea, checks a pocket watch, nods to the rain streaking the window. I imagine Thomas Crapper moving like that through a long day. Half tradesman, half quiet revolutionary, fitting polish to porcelain and manners to mechanisms. His firm, founded in 1861 in Chelsea, sold function like finery, and I love the audacity of that. Here, the window seemed to say, is comfort you don't have to apologise for. He took out patents in the later decades, not to invent the toilet from nothing, but to refine what people depended on, like a baker perfecting the rise rather than claiming to have invented bread. The bell twitches again, and a porter hurries in with a covered plate, kippers for tomorrow's breakfast, still perfuming the air with their smoky hello. The shop girl grins and cracks the door to let the scent tumble into the street, where it shakes hands with rain and coal and the ghost of lemon from our ice. I sip tea and decide the city's perfume is better for being a bit untidy, like a note scribbled on beloved paper. For a moment we step back out to the cart. One more penny lick, this time strawberry, the colour of a small velvet curtain. The glass, cold and thick, presses its circle into my palm. I think about all the palms before mine, how a simple dish can pass between strangers like a rumour of sweetness. It's easy to trace a line from these shared glasses to the larger lesson of pipes and traps. Cleanliness must be designed, not wished for. The city is learning that with each new rule, each new valve, water needs choreography, so does a crowd. Across the road, a newsboy sings the hour. I picture a hotel dining room not far away, a chair at the head of a table unwarmed, a toast unzipped, a speech waiting for its audience of one. Perhaps tonight again, our absent honoree is elsewhere, listening to a cistern's shy complaint, or lost in thought over a lever that refuses to click with the sound of a promise kept. I can sympathise. I've missed parties for less noble reasons than a perfect seal. We finish with a Victorian nightcap I swear feels like a blanket in a cup. Malted milk, steaming, vanilla-laced, the surface freckled with nutmeg. The first sip is a kindly librarian shushing the day. If you've ever padded to the kitchen in your socks for just a warm something, you already know this drink. It hums in the chest and smooths the edges of thoughts until they stack neatly, like folded linens. As we step into the mild rain, I tuck one last small date in your pocket, a breadcrumb so you know where we've walked. Thomas Crapper and Company set its Chelsea roots in 1861. By the 1880s, improvements to fittings and flushes were quietly standardising decency. Not fireworks, foundations. The sort of progress that purrs instead of roars. Now, let the street grow softer behind us. The lamps blur into patient halos, the violin becomes a thread you can wrap around your finger, and the city lowers its voice to a whisper made of steam and rain. Hold the lingering lemon on your tongue, the sponge's kindness in your hand, and the warm malt in your chest. From here, we'll turn a corner where curtains breathe like sleeping cats, and a latch will close with that small, satisfied click that says, "All is well for now." There's a little tea room tucked off the main street, the kind you would only find when you slow your walk just enough to notice the soft glow behind lace curtains. I nudge the door and it sighs inward, a bell tinkling like a polite whisper. Warmth gathers around our shoulders at once, coal fire alive in the grate, a faint vanilla sweetness in the air, and that hush people make when they're content to listen to teaspoons rather than conversation. I breathe in gently. The place smells of toasted crumb, orange peel, and something buttery that makes the mind uncrease. We choose a table near the window where the glass is faintly fogged. With a careless swipe of a sleeve, we could write hello, but we let the condensation be. The waitress arrives with a smile that looks practiced in kindness. Her tray sets down with tiny clinks, a silver pot that mutters as it settles, 2 cups that feel thin as bird shells, and a plate of scones as round and patient as moons. Steam escapes when I split one. The crumb is soft, almost feathery, and the heat carries the scent of baked milk and flour. A dish of clotted cream waits nearby, thick enough to hold a spoon upright, and next to it a jar of strawberry jam whose seeds sparkle like rubies caught in jelly. The first bite is the argument we will gladly have forever. Jam first or cream first? Tonight I go jam first, someone in the next room gasps without knowing why, and then the cream goes on top like a soft snow. It tastes like an apology from the day, sweet, cool, quieting. If a pillow learned to be edible, it would choose this career. I sip tea between bites, that malty warmth walking a measured line right down the centre of my chest. A small fact to anchor us, because even tea likes a saucer. Afternoon tea found its popular footing in the 1840s, often credited to Anna, Duchess of Bedford, who dared to admit she felt peckish between lunch and supper, and solved it with pots, cups, and little cakes. Isn't that very human? To invent a ritual out of a gentle problem, like inventing a valve to soothe a stubborn pipe, or a soft biscuit to hush a hungry hour. The menu here has its savoury pride too, and I can't resist something with cheese that glows like lampshade silk. Welsh rarebit arrives on toast, a glossy blanket of cheddar encouraged with mustard and ale. The first cut drags a shimmering path and the bite is all warmth, all comfort, like a grilled cheese that enrolled in finishing school and now pronounces its vowels beautifully. If you wanted a Victorian cousin to the modern slice of pizza or a hot pocket, this would raise its hand and say, "Present," and then dab its mouth with a napkin. I love how it hums, a low savoury note that tucks me closer to the fire. At the next table, a pair of shop girls share something that looks like frozen bread pudding wearing pearls. The waitress explains with pride, brown bread ice cream, a clever trick from the 19th century where toasted crumbs are folded into custard before freezing. I try a spoonful. It tastes like a bakery wrapped in snow, crunchy soft, sweet with a memory of molasses. Is there anything more Victorian than turning thrift into luxury with a bit of patience and a churn? The tea room's windows give me a view across the lane, a proper showroom with porcelain in the front, bowls and cisterns displayed like sculpture under gaslight. People still double take as they pass. Some pause, blush, and then press their noses to the glass anyway. I picture Thomas Crapper stepping out from behind a partition with a chamois cloth, buffing a glaze until it throws back the light like a winter moon. He'd have approved of this tea room, its order, its service, the way everything works without announcing how. Perhaps he came here once, meant to go to a dinner later where a toast would be raised in his honour, and while stirring his tea he forgot the world entirely, the way steam forgets it was once water. The bell above the door twitches again and a small gust swirls in, bringing with it umbrellas, laughter, and the perfume of damp wool. The waitress glides by with a plate of bath buns dusted in sugar like first frost. I add one to our table because self-control is a tomorrow problem, and find it pillowy, dotted with caraway, sweet in the way a friendly letter is sweet. Beside it arrives a little plate of anchovy toast, because contrasts are what keep a story awake. Salt against sugar, heat against cool, tea against rain. I nibble, sip, pause, and feel my thoughts settle like stacked books. Do you ever watch a room do its work? The quiet choreography fascinates me. A pot appears just as the cup exhales its last sip. A log in the grate rolls and throws sparks that rise like sleepy fireflies. Someone laughs softly, then covers their mouth, as if not to disturb the doilies. Every detail believes in manners, and manners, I'm learning, are simply kindness with instructions. That's what a good flush mechanism is too. Kindness with instructions. Wait. Go. Hush. Behind us, two gentlemen discuss a newspaper item. Some council rule about drains and public health. I don't need the article to know the story. The city is still teaching itself to be cleaner, still making invisible promises under our feet. I think of the U-bend, how a simple curve could hold a small pool of water like a sentry, keeping foul air where it belongs. It's such a modest magic trick you forget to applaud, but the applause is there, 1,000 quiet breaths that are easy because someone drew a line and asked water to stand guard. For a last sweet, we share a sliver of Victoria sponge because some traditions are lullabies you hum without thinking. Powdered sugar dusts my fingertips. I lick them absent-mindedly and taste the happy arithmetic of jam plus cream plus crumb. I wonder aloud, which bite of today felt most like progress? The rarebit's bright mustard, the ice cream's thrift turned luxury, or the sight across the lane, porcelain made proud in a window. Maybe progress is a plate you assemble from small, thoughtful pieces, and it becomes a meal only when you sit down with it and breathe. Outside, rain has softened into a mist that polishes the lamps. I pull on my gloves, and the leather smells faintly of tea now, which feels like a blessing. The bell says goodbye with a tiny note, and the street accepts us back into its cool palm. Behind us, cups will be washed, crumbs swept, the fire banked, the silver lined up like well-behaved geese. Across the lane, a young couple hesitates, then steps into the porcelain showroom with identical embarrassed smiles. It makes me want to cheer, but quietly, the way you cheer for a good listener. And as we turn the corner, scones content in the stomach, tea warm in the ribs, a memory of brown bread ice cream sparkling like crystallized sugar. Let your mind idle in that slow, pleasant gear. Imagine the next doorway opening on a different kind of comfort. Maybe a cook shop where soup steams steadily. Maybe a music hall with velvet seats and syrupy songs. Maybe a hallway where a brand new cistern makes its first polite whisper. We'll follow the softest sound, whichever it is, and let it lead us onward without hurry, as though the whole city were one long saucer meant to catch our cup. The music hall door swings inward like a curtain on a warm secret, and we step into a room where laughter hangs from the rafters like bunting. Gas jets hum with a tame little roar. Mirrors multiply the light until the place feels gilded, even though everything is really just clean and well polished. I lead you toward a small table, the wood soft with age, and the chair gives a polite creak that sounds oddly like welcome. From the stage, a comic in a check suit tells a joke about a parson, a pie and a pram. The punchline arrives not with a bang but a ripple of giggles that fizz around the room and settle like ginger beer bubbles. Speaking of, which appears as if conjured the moment I think it, the waiter slides over 2 thick glass tumblers beaded with cold. The ginger beer nips at the nose first, then warms the throat in a way that feels like courage-wearing mittens. Have you noticed how ginger makes even shy evenings brave? A good sip is like a pat on the back from someone who knows where all the doors are. I take another swallow and feel the day tidy itself. Snacks here are theatre in miniature. A girl with a tray threads between tables, balancing paper cones of whelks and cockles with the calm of a cat on a fence. She offers us one and I nod. Why resist the sea when it knocks so politely? The vinegar bites, the pepper follows, and the little shells taste like the seafront put on a bow tie. Beside them sits a Savoy, scarlet, glossy, a sausage that looks like it has opinions. I take a bite and it's smoky, soft, bit silly in the best way, a cousin to the modern hot dog that grew up reading the Times. If you wanted a pocket snack with an accent, this is it. Across the room, a vendor lifts the lid on a lidded dish and releases a puff of perfume you can almost chew. Mashed peas, buttery with a basil green smile. Peas pudding, spread on bread, is what a mashed potato might become if it took a class in charm. I spoon some onto a heel of bread and it behaves properly, staying put, tasting of hearth and thrift. Isn't thrift, done well, just another word for comfort that knows your name? The Victorians excelled at this, turning the ordinary handsome with patience and a recipe. I lean toward you to share a gentle lantern of a fact. By the 1890s, indoor water closets had become a common pride of middle-class London homes, the sort of thing you might point out to guests with the same satisfaction as a new pianoforte. It wasn't that one person invented everything at once, more that many minds, including Thomas Crapper's, taught water to behave with manners. Valves learned when to wait, traps learned what to keep out, and levers learned the difference between nearly and there. If you've ever pulled a handle and heard the exact sound of a promise kept, you know the feeling. The comic on stage dabs his brow with a handkerchief and launches into a song about missing an appointment. He counts the reasons on his fingers. Fog, a bad clock, a friend who talks too much, and I can't help smiling at the thought of our absent-minded plumber. Somewhere else in the city, perhaps at this very hour, a dinner plate cools in a grand room while a man in a workshop bends close to a troublesome fitting, the rest of the world temporarily filed under later. It's almost comforting to imagine progress arriving not with a toast, but with a small twist of a spanner and the softest, most satisfied hush. Between acts, the tray girl returns with peppermint humbugs that glint like tiny marble planets. I tuck one under my tongue and the peppermint clears the mind the way a clean window clears a view. The stage curtain twitches. Someone tests a banjo string. The audience rearranges itself with the rustle of fabric and the thrum of 100 quiet contentments. The whole room feels like a teapot just before it sings. Outside, a fine mist starts up, and the doorman swings the vestibule door now and then to toss the weather a friendly shrug. I sip the last of the ginger beer and feel its warmth reach my fingertips. The comic reappears with a mock-serious face and a newspaper, reading out a snippet about drains and decorum in a voice that sounds like a lecturing uncle, until he breaks into a grin and the audience hums with laughter. Even jokes carry the scent of improvement these days. The city can't stop learning to be kinder to itself. We gather our things, pockets a little pepperminted, thoughts a little brighter. As we step back into the lane, the mist makes halos of the lamps and writes our breath in silver. I can still taste sea and spice, sweet and sharp, a quartet that hums under the tongue. Somewhere behind us, the band strikes up a final tune. Somewhere ahead, a row of houses keeps its promises. Warm rooms, quiet clocks, water that will do its job without a speech. And as we turn the corner, I let the peppermint dissolve into an afterthought and think of Thomas, who might be carrying his own newspaper through a different door, late but satisfied, the world's applause replaced by the soft, unremarkable music of things working as they should. Come along, there's a softer street waiting and perhaps a tiny pie shop still awake, where a light in the window says what every good invention says too. Come in, rest, all is tended. The night has settled into that gentle hush I trust, the kind that makes a city sound like it's breathing under a warm blanket. We stand outside a modest workshop in Chelsea, where the window glows a honeyed yellow, the glass fogged just a little as if the room itself were thinking. Inside, tools hang in tidy rows, brass fittings gleam like patient stars, a kettle murmurs on the small iron stove. I ease the door and it gives a soft, polite click, the noise of a task already half complete. The air holds a companionable mix of machine oil, damp wool and tea that has been forgotten only long enough to taste determined. At the bench stands Thomas, waistcoat unbuttoned, sleeves rolled, eyes narrowed with the kindness of concentration. He's not the caricature the world made of his name. He's a steady figure in lamplight, listening to water as if it were practicing its scales. On the bench beside him lies an envelope with an elegant hand and the ghost of a wax seal, an invitation to a grand dinner, printed with curlicues and the promise of toasts. The hour on the mantel clock says what we already know. It is too late. The chair at the head of some distant table is cooling, the speeches have folded themselves into napkins, and somewhere a master of ceremonies is improvising with dignity. I watch as Thomas lifts a lever and lets it fall, a small rehearsal that sounds like a polite yes. He doesn't sigh, he doesn't scold himself. He only listens again, head tilted, waiting for the note he trusts. Have you ever stood at the edge of satisfaction, not needing applause to know you've arrived. This is that quiet. Outside, the gas lamps breathe. A cart rumbles past like a friendly thunder. A cat skitters across the yard with the soft urgency of midnight errands. Inside, the lamp throws a halo over a porcelain bowl, winter white steady on its pedestal, waiting for the final proof that it will mind its manners when called upon. Progress, when it is real, does not clear its throat. It simply works. He nudges the stopcock, checks the seal, listens for the hush that means the siphon has agreed to behave. Somewhere in the pipes, the city answers like a low cello. He lifts the lever one last time. The water waits, then gathers itself. Swift, obedient, no drama. And the room receives the sound as if accepting a compliment. Not loud, not shy, exactly right. If progress had a signature, it would be this, an audible promise kept. A knock at the door arrives like a surprised comma. In steps a friend from the supper trade, cheeks bright from weather, hat glossy with drizzle. He holds up a wrapped parcel with a grin that says he has rescued it from a table too grand to finish what it started. If the mountain won't come to the banquet, he chuckles, the banquet can come to the workshop. He unwraps the paper and the room warms 2 degrees. A heel of bread with a jacket of crackled crust, a wedge of cold beef still speaking in rosemary, and because the world is sometimes generous, a small custard tart the colour of early afternoon. We set the bread on the bench and it cracks softly, the crumb exhaling a little sigh of relief. The beef is calm and peppered. The rosemary greets the air like an old friend. I spread a ribbon of mustard and the scent goes straight to the sensible part of the brain that keeps lists. Thomas smiles. Not at the food exactly, but at the companionship of it. The way a heel of bread turns a room into a table. He pours tea from the faithful kettle. It tastes slightly metallic and entirely right. If a meal could bow, this one would, just the once. Did they raise a glass, he asks, not as a complaint, more as a footnote. 3, the friend says, and a song that didn't know how to end. We all let the silence hold that image. The glitter of chandeliers, the echo of a speech, the empty chair, and then the room chooses to be kind. I hand him the custard tart. It yields with a shy tremble, the pastry snapping like a well-told secret. Nutmeg leans in with its tiny halo. The first bite is comfort wearing a silk tie. The second is the sort of sweetness that reminds you to be gentle with yourself. I tuck a little lantern of a date into the corner of the bench, not to wake the room, but to guide the memory. By the 1890s, indoor water closets were becoming the quiet pride of middle-class homes across London, as ordinary as a piano and twice as considerate. It didn't happen all at once, and not because one man waved a wand. It happened because patience, study, and plain decency decided to share a room. A curve of pipe learned to keep bad air in its place. A lever learned to wait for the right moment. A city learned that cleanliness is a kind of love written in brick and brass. Outside, rain begins to stipple the window, the smallest Morse code of sleep. We can hear the city's lullaby if we are willing. The soft shuffle of late boots on cobblestone, the kettles giving their thin silver notes, the far-off rattle of a last tram like cutlery tidied in a drawer. Thomas wipes his hands, folds the invitation once more with a craftsman's respect for paper, and slides it into a book where it will live among diagrams and the occasional biscuit crumb. He doesn't promise to remember next time. He doesn't promise anything. He only looks at the bowl, then at us, and lifts his cup like a small earned salute. I take my own sip and let the warmth choose my bones. Isn't it a pleasant thought that some of the best work in the world is celebrated chiefly by the silence that follows it? No trumpet is needed when a room stays sweet and the night is allowed to rest. The friend wraps what remains of the bread for Thomas's breakfast, pats the cat who has appeared with the inevitability of stories, and sees himself out with one last wave. The door closes with that particular satisfied click, the kind that makes you think of latches as close relatives of levers. We stand a moment longer, watching the lamp-turned fittings into small planets. The room smells of nutmeg and tea, brass and rain. I can't help but ask, softly, a question that is also a lullaby. How many celebrations must we miss to learn that the work itself can be a celebration? Perhaps fewer than we fear. Perhaps the trick is to let the toast happen wherever we are, over a cistern that finally keeps its word, over a tart that tastes like forgiveness, over a city that has learned to speak water's language without raising its voice. When we step back into the lane, the rain has turned polite, the lamps taller for having worn halos. Behind us, the workshop settles. In front of us, the city lowers its voice another notch and begins to hum a bedtime tune in brick and shadow. I feel the ground's quiet assurance beneath my feet and the soft weight of the evening in my shoulders. If you listen closely, you might hear it too. The applause of a perfect flush. Far away, brief and discreet as good manners, then nothing but peace. And so our wandering ends where it always hoped to, in a room that works, a cup that warms, a street that promises to be kind. Let your breath follow the night's slow rhythm, easy in, easier out, and let your thoughts stack themselves, tidy as shining fittings in a window. If you're not already asleep, you're very close. The city will keep its quiet promises while you rest. The lamp can mind itself, the water knows what to do, and the chair at the head of the table, it will be there tomorrow, and tomorrow can wait. May these memories guide you into peaceful dreams. If this gentle journey helped you drift, let me know below. Only if it feels right. Sweet dreams and good night.